What is up, guys? This is Zach from Angler's Escape, and I just woke up. Last night we did some walleye fishing in this ice fishing cabin here. We have 8 ice fishing holes, caught some walleye, and I want to show you some tips on just ice fishing in general. And so these are a few tips and tricks that I've learned from talking from locals, doing a lot of article reading, and then personal experience. So the first tip is that you always want to use both natural and artificial baits. The nice thing about using both is a lot of times the artificial baits are a little louder and make more noise, flashier, so it brings fish into the area. And a lot of times those fish are a little, they know it's not quite real, and so they won't take those natural or those artificial baits, but it brings them into the area. But then they see your natural baits like the minnows and waxworms, and then they hit those. So you always want to be jigging like an artificial bait, such as maybe this rattling spoon. This rattling brings them into the area. They hear that, they see the sight, then they see the spoon and they're not quite convinced they want to take it, but then they see your minnow sitting there that they wouldn't have seen normally, and they'll take it, and that's when you'll get the fish. You'll always be using natural and artificial baits when ice fishing. This works for pike, walleye, and perch, and all other species. Another good thing is when you're ice fishing, you want to downsize. A lot of times people use too big of baits. So in the summer for walleye, I might use a big lipless crankbait like this, but in the winter for ice fishing, I'm gonna be targeting walleye with real small stuff. Sometimes even as small as like a forage minnow, maybe with some minnow eyes on it. So you can see these are a lot smaller than this big lipless crankbait. Another thing is, like, here's some other walleye lures that are really small, and some perch lures. This is a Rapala jigging wrap, and you can see it's pretty small. The rattling spoon, and here's a glow-in-the-dark spoon, which is good at night for a lot of fish, like perch and walleye. But you can see in the winter, when ice fishing, you really want to downsize from the big summer baits. The other thing is you want small jigging movements when you're jigging these lures. You're not ripping them up and down. You can occasionally try to attract fish in the area. Once the fish come in, you want to do really small vibrations and then stop jigging it all for like 10 seconds, wait to see if they hit it, and then do a little bit of jigging again, wait 10 seconds, a little bit of jigging. So small jig movements, small baits, help you catch a lot more fish when ice fishing. Another thing is when ice fishing, always target multiple species at the same time. You never know what fish are in the area. A lot of times if you're catching perch left and right and all of a sudden they stop, it could be because of big pikes in the area, so that's when you want to have the option to catch that pike. So you want to use a lot of different baits. You'll be using waxworms for perch, and then always have a pole with like a big chub or something for pike and something for walleye, so that way if one species is biting and the other isn't, you'll have that extra advantage to still catch fish. A fourth tip I'd like to mention, guys, is using tungsten jigs over lead jigs. The nice thing about this is tungsten's almost twice as heavy as lead. So here's a tungsten jig and here is a lead jig. This thing is almost as heavy as this, so I can get a really small jig and still have really good movement with it and be able to control it really well, and I can feel it really well. It drops real fast and it reacts real fast because it's so dense. And it's still small enough that I can catch a lot of perch and bluegill on it, and I just tip a little waxworm with this tungsten jig and catch a lot of fish on it. Another thing is when ice fishing, I find usually the best depth, if you have no idea where the fish are at depth-wise, is to drop your lure or bait all the way down to the bottom and then reel up a foot to 18 inches, and that's usually where I have the most luck when I don't know where the fish are at. And so finally, one more tip for ice fishing, guys, is to use pretty clear lines. So I usually use monofilament or fluorocarbon. For perch and bluegill, I usually use 2 to 4 pound test line. For walleye, I use 6 pound test line. And for pike, 10 or 12 pound less test line, sometimes with a leader on it. So I hope you learned something here today, and you'll try one of these tips when you go ice fishing. So thanks for watching.